Good evening, dear participants. You are all welcome to the event. I'm Özlem, one of the research assistants of our department. Thank you for being here with us tonight, and I wish everyone a fun and informative time. Tonight is the 8th of KTUDELL online seminar series, and we are very pleased to welcome Professor Dr. Julie Matthews Aydinli, a precious guest from Social Sciences University of Ankara. She's going to give us a speech titled with Teaching Advanced Reading Skills and Action Research-Based Account. And please feel free to write your questions in chat box whenever you want. They are going to be answered by our guest at the end. And a reminder, please do not forget to fill the form to get the certificate of participation. But before Professor Dr. Julie, let us listen our head of department, Professor Dr. Naci Kayaoğlu.
Thank you very much, Özlem, for your nice introduction. I'm very pleased, Julie, to welcome you to see here and to host you, and also to be with you. It's very kind of you to agree to share your experience with us tonight. Though tonight is very important because it's very important for American life. So I really feel a bit guilty because, and today coincides with the Americans, I mean, the big day. So Julie was born and grew up in the USA, but she received her MA, BA, and PhD all in Canada from McGill University, and BA in the Russian language and literature, again from McGill University, Montreal, 1985. And Julie received TEFL certificate from University of Victoria, 1992. And her MA and PhD in second language education from McGill University. And Julie worked as a Fulbright researcher at Matthew, Middle East Technical University in 2000 year. And from 2001 to 2017, it's a long time, Julie worked as an assistant associate professor in MA TEFL program built in university. But when I say MA TEFL program, so as a graduate of this program, so I feel desperate. I might like to say a few things about MA TEFL program, because this program is unique in the sense that it is a turning point for EFL settings and circles in Turkey. So as an MA TEFL graduate, Julie, I remember I was asked many years ago how to define this MA TEFL program. And I remember having said this was one of the best things that happened in Turkey, one of the wonderful things that has happened to Turkish EFL circles and EFL environment in Turkey. So you have a lot of experience in here. So you've made a lot of contribution and supervising over 40 let's say MA students across the country. So if I'm not mistaken, it was first established in 1988 because our previous speakers, Recep Hocam and also Turan Hocam Paker were the first the graduates of this program. So the program started with the support of Fulbright Commission, and we had visiting directors and scholars from through Fulbright from America. So what makes this program very special? Hundreds of teachers across the country have had the chance to complete the MA program, but it's not a matter of completing the program. It was a matter of having a chance to realize ourselves. So in the long term, and this program, help us to increase the quality of education and enhance the quality of our language teaching. So we have a lot of MA TEFL graduates, friends, colleagues who are doing a great job in a very critical positions. And also some of them are among the leaders of English language teaching in Turkey as well. So since May 2017, and Julie has been working as a professor in English language and literature department, Ankara Sosyal Bilimler Executive University. So what makes, and again, our speakers are all special, but what makes Julie a bit more special and Julie is married to a Turkish academician, Ersel Hocam, and from Trabzon Çankırı, as I said. And then Julie is a Trabzon gelini, so we are very proud of and Julie, and also we are very we know that, and Julie, there is no word in Julie's dictionary that means no. So she is very cooperative, and she always supporting us in any case we ask them to do. So Julie, thank you very much, and I'm very happy to welcome you and also to be with you. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. That was an extremely kind introduction, and I'm so glad that you had the chance to speak a bit about MA TEFL, because anyone who knows MA TEFL, it really is a treasure of a program. And I think there might be, besides yourself, maybe there's someone else here too. I'm not sure who.
A lot, believe me, it's a lot.
Graduate. I'm sure people know about it, and it does continue. I'm sad that I'm not there anymore, but Asbu is also a nice place. But it was great that we had the chance to talk about MA TEFL. First, I would like to thank you for inviting me. I've been wanting to have the chance to do something with you for a long time, something like this, and under the COVID circumstances, an online talk is great. And thank you to the team out there that's supporting you. It was nice to meet you on our group and for your support in setting this up. And thank you to all of you, students and teachers and whoever's out there listening. I appreciate your taking the time to listen to me on a Wednesday evening when you could be doing something else, but I hope you'll enjoy the talk. I'll share my screen to get started, and let me see here. I hope this will, can everybody see that, I guess?
Yes, it works.
Super, okay. Well, this was the name of my talk, as you've already been told, Teaching Advanced Reading Skills, an action research-based account. There are two parts to this title. What you will not receive in this talk is a kind of a list of things to do in your reading class on Monday morning. But I hope that you will gain some ideas about teaching reading. And as the second part of the title suggests, I hope you will also maybe gain some insights into a way of addressing any problems you might experience when you begin teaching or when you are doing your teaching, because this whole presentation is based on an experience I had a couple of years ago in which I had a problem, basically, and I had to find a way of solving it. And this presentation is basically an account of how I did that. And I would also like to say that I'm really glad for the opportunity to do this presentation, because this is not a topic I teach normally. I don't teach language skills. I usually teach linguistics, sociolinguistics, research methods, but I don't teach language skills. And I also don't do research that much on this topic. I do research on things like genre-based analyses of different types of disciplinary discourse, or these days I've been doing a lot of research on internationalization of higher education. So this presentation is an opportunity for me to share something with you that hopefully will be useful, but it's also a chance for me to talk about something that I don't usually get a chance to talk about. So it all started, let me tell you where the problem started. Well, let's call it a project now. The problem sounds too negative. So the project began. Okay, how did it begin? So 2 years ago, my new university, ASPU, came to me and said, Julie, we want you to teach a new course next semester. We've just thought it up and we're introducing it to the curriculum. We want you to teach it. I said, okay, well, tell me about this course. And they said, well, it's Elite 222, English Language and Literature class 222. And I said, okay, tell me a bit more. And they said, well, it's Elite 222 Reading Skills course. And I said, okay, do you have a description of the course? Do you have anything to guide me? Or what is this? And of course, we have a description. I said, okay. The aim of this course is to develop the students' reading skills. And I said, seriously? That's it? Okay. So there I was. I had a month to create a course called ELIT 222. Now I should point out, I did know who the students were. These were the second year students in the English Language and Literature program. But that was about it. So I had to devise a plan how I was going to do this. So the first thing I did is I took account of my basic understandings of designing a course and my own personal beliefs about teaching and what is important when designing a course. And I came up with basically 4 principles, if you will, that were going to direct the way I would proceed in designing this course. So the first principle is an obvious one. You've taken probably curriculum design or you've done curriculum design. So obviously I needed to consider the students' needs and their wants. This is a fundamental basic of curriculum design. Second, I wanted to make the class meaningful for the students. And one way that occurred to me of doing that was that I wanted them to have ways of measuring or seeing their own progress in the course. I thought that would be a way of making it meaningful. Third, again, this is something you can all relate to. I wanted to try to motivate the students. I wanted to see, what I could do to motivate them. So one idea that came to my mind was that I was going to show my investment, I'll talk about that word in a minute, in the learning process. So I was going to commit to doing in Turkish whatever I forced them to do in English. We'll talk about that in a minute. The fourth principle underlying my design of this course was to make a connection to research, because research is what I'm more familiar with, frankly. It's more comfortable for me. It's something I feel safe in relying on. And it provides a legitimacy, or for me it does, in how I was going to proceed. So these 4 principles, I'm going to talk about each one a little bit, how I did it, okay? So keep the 4 principles in mind. So step 2 was trying to address those 4 principles. So starting with that first principle, wants and needs of the students. Their needs, I'll skip down to the bottom of the page first. Their needs were pretty obvious to me. These were English language literature students. I knew the rest of their curriculum. They needed to be able to read a lot of literary texts. They didn't need a classic English for academic purposes reading. These were not people going into the social sciences of other disciplines or engineering or something. They were all literature students. So I knew that. So their needs were fairly clear to me. But I wanted to take into consideration their wants as well. So I decided that at the beginning of the class, I was going to give them a survey, finding out why they like to read, or did they like to read, when they read, how they read, what types of things they read, how much they read, etc. And I was going to use that to build on what I already had in mind from knowing their needs as being ELIT students. So that was one thing I was going to do. The second thing, I was going to try in this course to give them as much free choice as possible. So some freedom of choice in the readings they would do, some freedom of choice in the vocabulary they would learn. I'll talk about that in a minute. So that was the first of those 4 principles, the wants and needs. The second principle was trying to make it meaningful. And I wanted to let them see their progress. So I started thinking about a number of different measurements, if you will, that I could use, that they could then keep track of how they were proceeding or progressing. So I decided I would give them a reading comprehension test at the beginning of the course. and again at the end, the same test at the beginning and the end, so they could see if their scores went up. I was going to give them a motivation survey, like how comfortable they felt reading English, how much they liked it, how much they enjoyed reading in English at the beginning and the end, to see if that changed. A vocabulary test of certain words which I was going to make sure that they were exposed to in the class at the beginning and at the end of the course, to see if there was an improvement there. And finally, and I will talk more about this in a minute, weekly measurements of their reading speed. Okay, so these were 4 ways that hopefully they were going to see progress at the end of the class, hopefully. And also it was going to provide me with some interesting data to check and see if what I was doing was being useful for them. Third, remember, was motivation. Maybe in your courses, maybe you've read anything, I don't know, by Bonnie Norton Pierce. She wrote about the idea of investment. It's a way of talking about motivation in a sense, but investment is really trying to test how much people are think about investing money. This is like investing yourself in the language learning process. So this is where, to try to help them be motivated, I was going to show my own investment in their learning process by making a promise that whatever I assigned for them to do in English, I was going to try to do in Turkish. So if I was going to make them learn 100 vocabulary words, I would try to learn 100 vocabulary words in Turkish. If they had to read this much, I had to read that much in Turkish. Again, this is not just out of the goodness of my heart. I saw this as a chance, this project, to make it meaningful for them and for me too. Remember, this was not a course I normally teach. So this was important to me, to be meaningful and motivational. So remember, the 4th part was about research. I wanted to ground the whole design of the course in research. And I wanted to involve it in research in 2 ways. So the first way that I was going to do it was that I would use my knowledge of the research about reading to inform how I designed the course. What was I going to put in it? Okay, I'm trying to motivate them. I'm trying to make it, whatever, meaningful to them, but what was I going to teach? I was going to rely on research to guide me. And secondly, I was going to make the course itself a focus of research. So not only was I using research to decide what to teach, I was going to use all those things, those measurements and stuff, to be the focus of research to test what I was doing. So let's talk about each of those a little bit. What did I find when I looked at the research to inform the content, and how did I make it a focus of research? So informing the content, the research I looked at basically led me to 3 sort of principles of reading instruction that I would follow, sort of 3 pillars of my course. The first one had to do with vocabulary, and you'll see a blank space here. Years of research on vocabulary learning in second languages shows that you need to know a certain percentage of the words in a text in order to be able to fully comprehend it, to have full reading comprehension. And I'm curious if anyone wants to shout out or write in the chat box what percentage you think that is, because you might be surprised by the answer that research shows. Does anyone have any ideas? Let me look at the chats here. I have to do this to see it. 60% I see, 90%. The 90% is closer. 65, 70. Oh, wait, I just saw it. I just saw the answer. Mevlude. You basically got it. Sorry if you didn't see. It's basically, oops, I have to click on my screen to go to the next. 95 to 98%. I found that to be a shockingly large number. I was hoping it was smaller when I'm thinking of my Turkish learning. But research shows, if you want, you can look up this. This is a classic study here One of the people on this study, if I look at my screen, I think I can see, is William Grabe, who's the husband of a former director of the MA TEFL program and a leading scholar himself in reading, comprehension, and vocabulary, etc. And he is among the people who conducted this study that came to this conclusion. So clearly, if my students need to know that much vocabulary, I needed to increase their vocabulary in this course. So that was my first sort of research-based principle. Let's look at another piece of research that informed my choices of how to design the class. Reading strategies. You've all heard about them. You maybe are teaching them. You maybe use them. Again, there are hundreds, perhaps thousands of studies out there about reading strategies, some excellent studies. So what I've put here is just an example of a meta-analysis, which is when a scholar or scholars take all the research they can find on a topic, in this case, on the benefits or possible benefits of teaching reading strategies, takes all of those and combines their findings to see if there is indeed a consensus, a common belief that reading strategy instruction is an effective and appropriate thing to do. And yes, they find that yes, interventions, meaning actual explicit teaching of reading strategies, does show a benefit in students' reading comprehension capacity. So based on this is my second sort of principle of research, I decided I would do some explicit teaching of reading strategies in the classroom. And also I needed I like to have a common structure in my classes that makes me feel better. So I would kind of structure the classes overall on the principle of pre, during, and post-reading strategies. And you will see how that looks in a few minutes. So that was reading strategies. And then the third sort of research principle about reading that informed my class is just a kind of I'm putting it under the category of practice, but basically the idea that research shows that extensive reading, a lot of reading, and reading quickly are important in students developing their reading skills. Okay, so again, I put up here, you can find many great studies, but this was one that I found useful, a meta-analysis again of the research on extensive reading, which shows that, yes, I needed to make them read a lot. And then the second part of this, I needed to make them read faster. And just to give you a little insight into that, the research has shown that for students to read fluently, they have to recognize words in a sort of an automatic style. They cannot be just focusing on every word. If they read every single word, it slows them down. And when they slow down too much, the research shows less than 200 words per minute. If they start reading that slowly, by the time they get to the end of the sentence, they forget what they've read at the beginning of the sentence. And the result is they have poor reading comprehension. And there are strategies to deal with this. And one of them is timed readings, which I will talk about. I've already suggested this twice. And so just out of curiosity, I wonder another question for you. Does anyone have any idea what optimal reading speed is for good comprehension? Any guesses out there? Any guesses? I'm trying to, let me see my chats here. And again, I'm gonna have to do this. 180, 239. That's a pretty good guess. Yeah, I think someone hit it pretty much. 235, yeah, those are good. 290, 210. Yeah, whenever I switch from chats to my screen, I have trouble. Ideally, in fact, 250, you said 239. I should have looked at more chats. 250 actually is about the minimum. And in fact, up to 350 is better for good comprehension. And you all do that, or we all do that, I should say, in our native language. That's pretty normal in a native language, but in a second language, that's not so easy to achieve. So I needed to make them, sorry, let me skip that. I needed to make them read a lot, and I needed to help them to read faster. So those were the sort of the strands of research that were going to inform the content of my course. But then I said there was a second angle to research, which was to make the class a focus of research as well. And this brings us to the second part of my title, which is the action research-based account. And the first thing I would just like to share with you, of course, you might hear people talk about teacher research or teacher-based research or practitioner inquiry or action research, etc. And you might be wondering, are they the same? Are they different? Technically, people use them interchangeably a lot, and that's not a bad thing. I personally don't have a problem with using them interchangeably. But action research people might want to add a little bit more to it. But first, let's talk about the basic of what it means. You know, all of these terms, teacher research, teacher-based research, practitioner inquiry, they're based on a principle that we, all of us as teachers, as language teachers, are professionals who can be a part of the research process. We can help develop theory. It doesn't have to be just the professors off in their ivory tower. It should be the people in the classroom with the students who are gathering data, who are asking the important questions. They know what the important problems and questions are, and doing inquiry in a systematic manner. So not just like, oh, today I ask a question of my students, but some kind of systematic research or inquiry in the context of the classroom or the school or whatever, and building theory out of it. So that's the principle. Now, does action research mean something different? Well, I guess you could say that action research emphasizes that out of that inquiry, you should be making a change. Action research is based more in a critical perspective of, you know, maybe trying to challenge power imbalances and stuff. I won't go into that, but they do emphasize that you need to not only do this systematic inquiry, but you have to take an action. You have to make changes based on what you find out. And they also emphasize a cyclical element. And what does that mean? Let me show you a little diagram here, because this also ends up being kind of the pattern of what I did in this project, if you will, which I'm telling you about tonight. So it starts out with identifying a problem, developing a plan for action, of action, collecting data in some way. You don't just think about it and sit back and decide to do something different. You have to collect some data. You analyze that data, make some conclusions, possibly, maybe you report the results somewhere. That's what's a little bit lighter. Based on this, though, you adjust your theory, or you make some changes, basically, and you start again. I think the key to it being cyclical, this is not a one-time do it, problem solved, and never think about it again. They're also trying to emphasize with this cycle that this is something we should all be doing as teachers, whether you're teaching, kids in a primary school or mechanical engineering students in a university, whatever your context is. This is something you can use to guide you in how to keep yourself an active and motivated teacher, in fact, too. So this cycle informed me in this case, in which my problem, remember from the very beginning, was that I was given a description this long of a class to design, and I needed to find a way of creating a class. So that was my problem. And then I started following this chart. I developed my plan of action. And then in the class, I decided I would collect data. So I've talked about what kind of data that was, but let's move on. Now, step 3, I think, I can't see my screen, was now I have to structure the course. I had to build the course so that I would be able to collect my data and teach the course. So I had those 3 fundamental research pillars, if you will, the one about vocabulary, the one about reading strategies, and the one about the reading a lot and reading fast, okay? So based on that, here were some things I decided to do with the course itself. I decided this was a course that would meet once a week for 3 hours. It's a university level course. So each week in that 3-hour class, I would base that 3-hour class on a pre, during, and post-reading strategy sort of framework. So we would have a reading that the students would do outside of class. So they would come to class having done that reading, and we would do some activity in class that would be a post-reading activity based on the week's reading. We would then move on to some kind of reading strategy instruction, usually doing things with while reading strategies that they could then use when they were reading outside of class. And we would end up with a pre-reading exercise for the next week's for the reading that they would have to do in between classes. To give you an idea of just some of the strategies that I focused on, some pre-reading strategies that I used were brainstorming, preparing them for the vocabulary they would see, making predictions based on, these are pretty classic. You can find these in any reading strategy article or book. These were some of the during reading strategies that I instructed them in class: skimming, scanning, identifying the main idea, making inferences, finding word meaning and context. And then there were the post-reading activities, which I did with the reading they just concluded. And what I really want to talk about, though, is the weekly speed reading thing, because this was an interesting study, this idea that if you did repeated speed readings with people, it was a good way, an effective way of helping them train their own eyes to move faster. We do it naturally in our native language when we're reading, but in a second language, we're less comfortable with the idea of skipping something. We think we're going to miss the idea. So we slow our eyes down even, and we start reading every word. And as I said earlier, that's not very useful, because then we get so slowed down, we lose comprehension. So I decided that I would start every class every week with a weekly speed reading exercise. And I had them keep track of their own progress on this. It was not for a grade, it wasn't a test or something. It was just about possibly seeing improvement, okay? And while they were doing it in English, I was going to do it in Turkish. So let me show you what this looked like. This is what the timed reading texts looked like every week. There was a text. I would choose a text purposefully that was somehow connected in theme or in style or in genre to the reading of the week, the genre of the week. And I would prepare it with numbers along the side. This is the number of words that, if you only read to like the end of here in 1 minute, this is how many words you've read. So it helped them to quickly calculate how many words they'd read without having to count every word. So, if they got down to here, they would look at the end over here and see how many words they'd read. And the way it worked is that I would say they had the paper on their desk turned upside down, and I would say, "Are you ready?" And they'd say, "Yes." We'd turn it over, and for 1 minute, I would time it on my watch. 1 minute they would read, and they would read along at as fast as they could comfortably feel they could read. And when I said stop, they would make a mark on the paper. I stopped here, okay? And then they would see how many words they'd read. And then I would say, okay, look up, and they would look up for a minute and kind of, rest for 10 seconds. And then I would say, start again. And they would not, you don't start here, you start back up at the beginning, at the very beginning of the text, and you read the same thing again for 1 minute. And after 1 minute, I say stop, and then they would mark where they got to. And here's the thing, the second time they read it, usually they would get further. They would, if the first time they read 155 words, the second time they would read probably 165 words, maybe. Remember, the key thing is rereading the same text. Sorry, is that a question? Would you like to try a quick speed reading, timed reading? Very short one, not a whole minute, just maybe 30 seconds, I was thinking. Let me get my timed. I should check the chats though. Was that a question I needed to see? Of course. Oh, okay, great, super. Thank you. I don't want to put the next screen up yet because once I put it up, I want you to start reading, okay? So instead I want to get my timer ready. And this takes me a second. I'm terribly slow at this, sorry. And chronometer. I'm just going to give you 30 seconds, okay? So when I switch to the next screen, you will start reading and I will stop you in 30 seconds and you just make a note in your mind, you can't make it on the screen, where you are, and then look to the right-hand side and you'll see a number and try to guess. If you're in the middle of the sentence, estimate where you are between this number and that number, okay? And remember, we're only doing 30 seconds, so you have to double it to know your time for 1 minute. But anyway, are you ready? Is that long enough explanation? I'm going to turn the page, and when I do, start reading, okay? But let me get ready here. Okay, but I have to start. Stop. Okay, now look at me. Don't look at the screen right now. Just look at me. But make a note, first of all, or remember where you stopped. If you finished the page, I'm sorry, I didn't want to make it too small, so I made it big letters, but okay. So you should take a note for yourself, write it down, approximately, or write down how many words you read, okay? But look at me, don't look at the screen right now, or look somewhere else. Don't look at the words right now. I'm going to give you another 30 seconds because you have to do it twice to see the effect. Remember, don't start where you finished. Go back to the beginning. Start back at the very beginning, the wars in Afghanistan again, okay? But wait till I tell you to start. Don't look, don't look. Are you ready? Set, go. Stop. Okay. So, does anyone wish to share? Just say, I guess I'm curious, did you get further the second time? Does anyone want to write in the chat box? You don't have to say your numbers. I'm not trying to, shame anyone or say anything, but did you get further the second time? I got further. Yes, yes, yes, yes. Yeah.
Actually, the second time was much better in my case.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's what,
5 seconds earlier.
wow.
Yes,
Yeah.
right.
Yep. Automated. I can't even say the word. Automatization. Someone wrote. Yes, you're right. Yep. Everyone got further. Same. Yep. About 50 words further. Wow. Yep. That's exactly what happens. Because you're becoming more familiar with the text, the second time is faster. Oh, someone wrote a long chat and I missed it. What was it? First I could come to till the word comedy and say, good for you. See? And here's the point. The point of doing this is we would do this every week, and the students got used to it. And not only did they see a change in their reading time in the one session, but they would also see from week to week that it gradually went up. I hoped. Okay, we'll find out the answer. Did they really at the end? I'm going to talk to you about that. But that was the timed reading. Okay. I got to go back to, I'm getting behind here. Outside of class, remember I wanted them to read a lot. So that was the reading fast, but I also wanted them to read a lot. So outside of class, I decided that they would have 2 readings every week. One, which I would assign them, and then a second one, which they would choose. Remember, I'm trying to keep it a bit, interesting for them, that they would choose that had to be of the same genre of reading that I had assigned. And I will tell you what those genres were in a minute. The second thing I wanted them to do is keep a reading journal. So every week, on the basis of the genre that I had assigned them to read, I would also give them a weekly prompt to use for their reading journal. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And thirdly, they had to keep vocabulary notebooks, because remember, vocabulary is important. They had to learn a lot of vocabulary. And in fact, I decided I wanted them to learn 20 words a week, which if you take out the first class and the midterm, etc., basically we had 10 weeks together. So it would be 200 words that I wanted them to learn. And of those, about half of them were words that I picked out of my assigned readings, and the other half were words that they would pick from their readings that they chose to read, okay? Let's look at those a little bit more in detail. The list of genres that I selected, these were the genres I selected. Remember who my students were. These were literary students, literature students. So, and I wanted to start it out a little bit easier and lead up to the most difficult, which is a research article. So we read interviews with authors the first week. We read blogs, book reviews, poems. This says graphic short story. I couldn't fit it because this was one of the ones they were really into when they, I'm still muted. Can you hear me?
Oh. Yes, you can.
Okay, I got a message that I was muted. They had expressed that many of them really liked reading graphic novels, graphic short stories, like with pictures. So I put that in because of them. Also, they were really into poetry, so I put that in for them. And then some other things that I thought were important: opinion essays, autobiographies or memoirs, literary critiques they wanted, literary essays I chose, and research articles, which I thought were important. These are just an assortment of some of the things. You can see actually some of the PowerPoint screens that I had and some other things there. Anyway, so those were the genres. Secondly, in terms of the reading journal, to give you a sense of some of the prompts that I gave them. This is the prompt that they had for the week when we were doing the genre of interviews. I assigned them a reading of an interview with an author. They had to read one of their own, and these were some of the questions I asked them. Or for the week when we did poetry, these were the questions they had to answer in their reading journal. Because this was a reading class and I wanted to give them choice, the other choice that I gave them for their reading journal, they could do it in any format. They could write it by hand, they could type it, or they could record themselves doing the reading journal orally to give them that freedom of choice. And finally, for the vocabulary notebooks, each week there would be 20 words required for their vocabulary notebook. Some of them, like I said, I would choose from my reading, and some they would choose to make it 20. Some weeks my reading was really hard and maybe 15 of the words were mine and they only had 5 for themselves. But some weeks there were only 6 or 7 of mine, approximately 100 words that I determined beforehand and 100 of theirs. And the process was, the first week they would write down those 20 words, the word and a definition of it. The second week, they would write a synonym and an antonym of the word. The third week, they would write the word in a sentence. But remember, on week 2, they had the 20 words from the previous week and 20 new words. By week 3, they were dealing with 60 words each week, because the first week's words, by then they were writing the words in a sentence. The second week's words, they were writing them in synonyms and antonyms. And then they had a new set of first week words that they were writing out with their definitions. So it was a lot of repetition, because that's the secret of vocabulary notebooks, is repeating those words so that it becomes more stuck in your head. Putting it all into action, this is just a couple of screen slides from my syllabus that I ended up creating. This was the course description that I created, not that little one-line description that they had. And this is a sort of a snapshot of what the course plan looked at. You can look at it yourself, but it's a repetition of what I've been telling you about. And step 5, remember the cycle. When you get all the way down to finding out the results of the research. What was the research? Remember, I was measuring all those things before and after the class. Motivation. Remember, they took a motivational survey at the beginning and at the end. The results showed of my research, they all gained some confidence in reading. They felt more confident reading in English. The rest of the measures stayed more or less the same in terms of their motivation about English reading, but they did report gaining in confidence. Speed, those timed readings, the numbers showed from the first week to the 10th to the 13th week, the average speed with which they read did increase, but it increased differently for everybody. So I don't have exact numbers for you here, but it did show an actual increase through that weekly reading. Comprehension test, yes, again, their scores on the reading comprehension test, they took one at the beginning, the same test, they took it again, they saw an increase. Can I say that was the result of my course? I can't, but I hope it helped. But it might have also been that they were taking 4 other courses and they were doing a lot of reading. So extensive reading, though, seems to have helped. That vocabulary test, no surprise here. I had those 100 words that I knew I would be assigning them. They took the test on those 100 words at the beginning and again at the end, and they knew many more, but that's not really a surprise to me. On the question of like overall, questioning myself at the end of this, did I think this project went well? How did it feel? I enjoyed the course. I think the students did too. They seem to have gained at least in some confidence and speed, hopefully because of the course. The one failure in the course, if I have to be honest with you, I could not keep up my bargain. I was not able to keep up my vocabulary notebook in Turkish or my reading log in Turkish. So that was a disappointment to me, but I was way too busy. But the good news is I'm being asked for the first time in 2 years to teach the course again this spring. So I have a second chance to try and see. If you go back to that cycle of action research, you might remember the part when you get down around 7 o'clock, it says, report the findings. So in the good spirit of action research, that's what I'm doing with you tonight. I'm reporting my findings. And now I need to just think about what adjustments will I make before I start teaching this course again next month. I think I will keep the overall structure. It seemed effective. I will make some adjustments to the genres because maybe this group of students will want to read something different. So I may make some adjustments there. And I will be more realistic about my ability to keep up with the students. I've decided I will keep the vocabulary notebook because I think that's reasonable to expect of myself, but I can't keep the reading journal. I don't have time, so I won't do that. And basically, that's it. That's my report on how to teach advanced reading skills. from an action research-based perspective. My hope is that from this talk, you have some ideas both about teaching advanced reading, and that you have maybe a strategy of your own that you can use if you have some issue you're facing in your teaching or some problem. This is a way to address it, perhaps with an action-based research. And that's the end of my part of the presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing and ask if, well, first I'll say thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Okay, Julie, thank you very much for very beautiful and very informative and useful information you shared with us.
Kind of long, sorry.
The results of your research. If someone pushed me and to summarize what Julie has said and what kind of lesson we should get, well, I can say on my behalf that we need to be, and all teachers need to be somehow researcher in the instruction. So instead of following textbook in their hands, so we need to know, they need to know what we are doing, why we are doing, how we are doing, whether we achieve what we want to achieve. And today I was having a class with last year students. I was teaching the all corrective feedback. I was explaining the types of all corrective feedback and recast, implicit, and clarification. So the question was, which one is the most effective one? Which one should I use? I said, no one can tell you which one is the best one. There's no best one, but these are the types of all corrective feedback, but it's you who will decide, who will evaluate, who will measure which one works, which one may work or may not work in their own context, which requires you to be a kind of a researcher and ask them when you buy a phone or when you buy something, so you get some sort of information, right, before you buy anything. So again, same thing, when you decide to do something, please make sure whether it works or not. So, and thank you very much. And it's a very, very interesting presentation. I have a very good questions, and one from Nur Gökçen, and the other one is from, I'm not sure, Gülbahar Hanım. And the question for you, and Nur Gökçen says, the first time I also tried to understand the text, but the second time I just read it. So this means, so there's this sort of dilemma between the reading speed and also comprehension.
Absolutely. The purpose behind those timed readings, yes, there is that contradiction, but it's about actually training your eye to try to move faster. It's as simple as that. It's not about, at this point, just getting comfortable with the idea of moving your eye quickly from word to word in a non-stressful environment. It's not a test where you have to worry about, did I really understand it? And the idea, the research says that if you do this enough, over time, it becomes more of a habit. That automatization, that word I can't pronounce, it becomes more automatic. And then eventually, hopefully, if you're also increasing vocabulary and these other things, then both your speed and ultimately your comprehension does also improve. That's what the research says. So, but I agree with you, there is that, it seems like apples and oranges. Well, the first time I was just trying to understand it. The second time I was just reading, I already knew that I already had understood it. So it does seem a bit like, of course, but they say that over time with practice, that helps.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, just one point to remind you, and those who want to obtain the certificate of participation attendance, so please just click and fill in the form. I'm receiving a lot of thank you messages probably from your students, and so I just simply share with you. But my support team, please, and if you find some interesting questions and to ask, please feel free. I cannot see the whole chat box, and also we have some audience and who follow us through YouTube. And I open up the floor for questions anyway. I mean, anyone who wants to ask question orally, welcome.
Julia Hocam, there's a question. If you want, you can read as well. But if you want, I can help.
You know, it's easier if you read. I see them show up, but if I open them, my eyes are so bad, I have to like do this to read them.
It's fine. Zeynep Demirok says, among all the social media such as TikTok, Viber, Instagram, Drone is spending a lot of time. How can I motivate students to read? It's getting harder and harder. Can you give an advice?
Oh my gosh. I will combine my answer with the other person that I did see the comment said, my students don't even like to read in Turkish. How do I motivate them to read? So this whole issue of motivation, whether it's demotivated because they don't like to read even in their native language, or demotivated because they're only reading short things on their phone. There's no silver bullet. There's no answer to that I can give, except to try different things. I'm going to go back to my motivation in this project is try different approaches. Try, if you're teaching students, try allowing them to read the types of things they like to read. I understand that you're in a different position than I was in this class. Many of you are teaching students who have to take maybe an English language test at the end to get to their departments or something, if they're in a hazırlık situation. Or you're going to be in that teaching context maybe. And then you are restricted a bit more than I was. For me, my way of addressing the problem you're telling me about was by putting in readings that were not traditional English for academic purpose readings. I was allowing them to read blogs and you know, different types of things. I still think just trying to, as much as you can, balance out, you know, reading, if they're reading online, you know, things related to gaming, you know, something they like, or reading things online related to football, if they're into football, or into music, reading, you know, try to get them reading and interpreting even song lyrics, or just try to find, to offer them as much diversity as you can. Try to give them as much free choice as you can. Those are sort of the principles that come out of my experience from this class. Of course, within the limitations of your own teaching context. You know, reading social media things can be used as a tool too. It doesn't have to be just seen as a negative thing. Try to incorporate that into your class a little bit if you can, maybe, you know, and accept the limitations of what you're doing. I mean, some people you'll never be able to get to them because they just don't like to read, but that would be my answer, I guess.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So we have Selçuk Şentürk, Dr. Selçuk Şentürk from Kafkas University in Kars. Selçuk Hocam, buyur hocam.
Thank you, Julie. Yeah, your presentation has been amazing, and it has been quite inspiring for an emerging scholar like myself. And then it was like a kind of eye-opener. And I just have some contributions to your lecture, as well as some questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So first of all, I've followed the idea that it is just like a focus of research makes your classes meaningful for yourself and for your students as well. So that is the point. What we lack in our context in Turkey, as the teachers, as the tutors, we lack the motivation, and that is a problem. Yeah. And I have spent some time in the United Kingdom as part of my research, and I have witnessed that most of the lecturers, they were bringing their own research to the classes. So that has been quite motivating for them and for students as well. So another thing I can see, you're just remaking your classes again and again. I mean, in this way, you're just fine-tuning your research, which is a good strategy. And also, as far as I can see over my notes, so you're just trying to improve reading habits of your students. And you know, in Turkey, it is like, as far as I can remember, it is just a minute per day. So that is quite awful, I have to confess. Mm-hmm. So, you know, but this might pose a problem. So do you think in Turkey, is it something easy to teach your students reading for developing their English language while they're just lacking these habits? So that is quite problematic as far as I can see. So just having this question in mind, I just would like to share my ideas in my classes. So I'm just teaching English literature, introduction to English literature, and speaking skills, and also literary criticism. So I'm just trying to focus on the same text. For example, in my speaking class, I'm just bringing the idea of what is enlightenment. So we read a passage in my speaking class, and then we discuss it in my literature classes.
Mhm.
So in this way, the understanding of the students increase day by day. That's what I can see. And also sometimes I'm a good follower of the Conversation Co UK, So it is a kind of cluster of articles. I mean, like informal articles on diverse subjects. What we do, I'm just showing my students, look, if you read this one and understand, you're amazing, because you're understanding an article, you're reading an article from an expert, and they find it quite useful. So, and then at times, for example, if a month ago, we read something on mosquitoes, the mysterious life of mosquitoes, and then at the end of the reading, it was a speaking class, and I asked them, could you please write your opinions? If you were a mosquito, how would you lead your life?
Mhm.
So they wrote that one as well. So my methodology is engaging with the language rather than using these mechanical concepts. That's what I'm trying to do. So I'm quite new in my field, but I'm just pushing the limits, because in Turkey it's all about like showing that you know good English. So but before you have the habits of reading, so that doesn't make much sense. So that is my kind of feelings today, and thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Those are great ideas. I think what's encouraging is that if you can gather the energy to do it, there are so many interesting ideas out there. And at the end of the day, remember, I think I said this in my talk, it's not, I do it for the students, but it's also out of a selfish reason too. If I try these changes and I make these adjustments, I try new things, it makes it more interesting for me too. The research part of this project that I did was to also give it meaning to me. So I would be more invested in the process as well. So it's both hopefully good for the students and good for ourselves. You mentioned one thing, repeating readings. That's another, it's another strategy that research has shown is very useful. Reading the same text a couple of times. It sounds, you may think, oh, that sounds boring. No, in fact, it's been shown to also have a positive effect on reading comprehension. So I think that's a good thing you're doing that. And as for the other things, I think it's great. I think that's exactly what I would encourage people to be trying to do, is find new ways, incorporate new ideas and try them. And as Naji Hoja said, the big message from my talk, try them, study them, see what works. Maybe something that works in your context is great and it isn't in someone else's, but maybe something you do altered a little bit will be effective. That's what this is all about. And sadly, these are difficult times, both because of the pandemic and because of, we're all struggling in different ways. So it sometimes can be hard. Your students are struggling too, to be honest. I've seen, my husband was noticing, Buchan students are among the happier students in the country. And this year, for the first time, he even noticed his students openly admitting they were struggling, and it was not, easy to deal with these things. So we have to be aware that this is a particularly difficult time. But if we try new things, try to be excited about what we're doing, hopefully. I sound like this Pollyanna-esque, trying to see the good. I'm encouraged when I see young professors like yourself, Selçuk Hoca, doing exciting new things. So
Okay, thank you very much for your question, Selçuk Hocam, and also answer Julie. And I admire Selçuk Hocam. I mean, he's a kind of person who's trying to find something new, trying to find out new ways to make his instruction and teaching more meaningful. So I really much appreciate and his great and sincere efforts. Thanks again for your contribution as well. Yes, our support team do you see any question?
Yes, Hocam, from YouTube especially.
Okay.
Fatih asked Julie Hocam, when you give students reading assignments to read 2 books, how do you check if they have actually read the books?
Yeah, that's it. First of all, I didn't assign them to read books. I mean, if you remember my list of genres, these were generally texts of, a fairly, maybe a couple of pages. The longest one, the research article at the end was maybe 25 pages. How did I check it? I didn't see, that's the thing. I didn't have to make them prepare for a test. They got graded on, did they complete their reading journals? And in order to complete their reading journals, I had to assume that they had read the text, because those prompts, remember I prepared prompts for them, at least I had to hope they'd read them to be able to do the reading journal. So they had to complete the reading journals. They had to complete the vocabulary notebooks, and I checked those. And in the class, we would do activities, post-reading activities. I was keeping track. Participation was part of the grading rubric for the class. They had 15% was participation. So if they were able to participate, they had to be able to participate, they had to read the text. So I never actually checked. I couldn't check if I didn't, but on the basis of their ability to fulfill the things I could see, like the discussions, the doing the activities in class, the reading journal, and the vocabulary notebook, I had to assume that they were reading. That's not a great answer, I know, but in my situation, I didn't need to, or I couldn't. I didn't need to have a way of determining whether they read it. At some point, we have to give some trust to the students. If they don't want to learn, if they don't want to read, there's not much we as teachers, I don't know, Naji Hoja, do you want to help me out there? I mean, what can you do to force them if they don't want to learn? I tried to provide interesting activities and activities that would give me some insight, but at the end of the day, you can't check, as far as I know. If anyone else wants to add to that, we're all teachers here, so anyone else might have ideas on that.
Yes, I mean, on several occasions we have said that, and we are not here to teach anything. So this is a kind of platform where we can exchange our ideas. I am sure you can come up with very brilliant ideas, and so you're always welcome. But let me remind one point. Some of you might have missed the beginning of the presentation. Julie made the point very clear, and Julie said she doesn't teach language skill, but she has very valuable and experience, which she kindly shared with us, and also in relation to her project. But Julie has been focusing on international higher education, second language acquisition, academic literacy development, genre analysis of academic discourse. So these are the major areas as a researcher, and Julie has been interested in. But I mean, she is very kind enough to share her own long experience, which comes from her own teaching and also project as well. Anyone else to make contribution or ask any question? Turgay, Doçent Turgay Hocam from Ordu University. Turgay Hocam, it's good to see you again. Yes, microphone sende hocam.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Julie. It was great. Your presentation was great. I want to give a few notes about my personal talk with my students, professor students, student teachers. And what I wondered about teaching reading is that teacher believes about teaching active reading in such a framework. Are they really ready to teach language? Are they ready? Are they really ready to teach alto reading in such a way, especially novice teachers? What I wonder, and teachers and students' expectations, as you know, can clash regarding learning or improving alto reading in such a way, especially novice Turkish EFL teachers can resist in teaching alto such a way. It may be a labor sum for some teachers, as they may like traditional classrooms that includes translations from L1 to from L2 to L1 to be sure about students' understanding of the text. And in this way, novice teachers may feel more comfortable and less anxiety regarding teaching the language skills. What I realized in my personal talk, to feel less anxiety, novice teachers tend to teach reading skills from the perspective of translation the text from English to Turkish, because they want to be sure that our students can understand the text.
I mean, I'm sorry, am I interrupting you, or did you want to add more to that?
That's all what I want to contribute to.
I mean, my comment would be, I would never, want to say that, dictate how someone should or shouldn't teach. You should teach how you're comfortable teaching as well, because if I tell everyone, no, you should do it the way I did it, for example, in this class, it's not going to work for everyone. I think that was the key principle I said. At the beginning, I outlined those 4 sort of principles that were going to guide me, but those were my personal principles, except for the needs and wants, which is a basic of curriculum design. And again, to repeat also what Najiojo was saying, remember, I'm not as familiar with teaching language skills as many of you are. Do you know the last time I taught a language skill course was 25 years ago? Some of you weren't even alive, probably, the last time I was teaching language skills, reading, writing, listening, speaking, grammar and stuff. As happens too often in this field, some of us get shifted into teaching of, other issues, and we don't actually get that in-class experience teaching the skills. So, I have my beliefs about teaching through translation that I think there's a time and a place for that too. And I would never criticize people that find that a comfortable way to do it. And I think it can be done in, sometimes that can have some benefit as well. I would just encourage everybody to try to push beyond their comfort zone a little bit, to try something new every week, or to try something new every couple of weeks at least, and see if it works for you and for your students. If you see it works a little bit, excellent, you can try it a little bit more. If it doesn't work, it's not the end of the world. Look, in my experiment, not everything worked perfectly. I didn't keep up my side of the investment package, but try new things. It will make you feel better. And I would also recommend teachers keep a journal or something of what works, what doesn't work, what your students seem to like. It keeps you more involved in the teaching process. And it also allows you to explore how you can maybe even find things that you will be more effective than what you've been doing. Maybe not, but I guess that's a response to you, to your comment on your comment.
Thank you very much, Turkaycığım. If there is no one, if there is anyone desperate to ask a question, always welcome, but I know from the experience that we have had so far, so we can talk for hours and hours, but
I'm sure, yeah.
yes, but I'm sure, and so we need to close up this session. Okay, Julie, I cannot thank you enough. Yeah, you made this evening wonderful for us, and we are very, very happy and to see you and to welcome you. And I hope we'll see you on a different occasion with a different topic in future.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Again, as I said at the very beginning, you have been very cooperating and cooperative and in your nature. And thank you very much. Hocama da, Ersan hocama da kucak dolusu selamlarımı iletiyorum.
I will pass that on.
Okay, evet.
Um,
Arkadaşlar, herkese iyi akşamlar. Thank you very much for being with us. I mean, you could be watching TV and doing something else, sipping your coffee, and
but you're
choose to be with us. And thank you very much. It's a very kind and good of you, and to make also contribution with your questions. And thank you very much. Herkese iyi akşamlar diliyorum arkadaşlar.
thanks.
İyi akşamlar Naci Hocam.
İyi akşamlar Selçuk.
Julie hocam.
Bye bye. Thank you.
İyi akşamlar Julie.